is the simplest way the Buddha could explain enlightenment. Events happen, deeds are done, there is no individual doer thereof. Events happen, doings are done, there is no individual doer thereof. So the realization of enlightenment is there is no ego, really. There is no personal doer. Okay, so it appears that Joseph may be teaching this class, but it's not really Joseph teaching the class. Okay, so to give you a little bit more on that, these are the three basics, I would say, of self-realization from this Indian teacher. The first is, I've told you this before, but I'll explain a little more what it means. Nirvana, which is the enlightened state of consciousness, nirvana, heaven, okay, is in samsara. So we could say the higher dimensions are in the lower dimensions, as above, so below. Okay, that means that there is only God, there is only source, there is only consciousness, and so there are not two, there are only one. Okay, and that's non-duality. So non-duality means that anything that possibly happens is a part of God. God, consciousness, source, whatever you want to call that, okay? The unmanifest, source, consciousness, God, all there is, and the manifest, that which we can experience through our five senses, are not two, they are one. This can be difficult for the mind and the ego to understand, because why is there so much darkness in the world? It's because people have chosen darkness as a free will choice, and God allows it, and God allows them to create from it. Okay, and so it appears that there's duality. Duality is that the conflict of opposing views, right? The conflict of opposing principles, good versus evil, and all that. But as you start to study enlightenment and contemplate enlightenment, the first basic that you have to remember is that there is only God. There is only source. So even if we're looking at a demon, the demon is still an aspect of God. Okay. So there's a story of a man, a millionaire, who's a seeker of truth, and a scientist, and they're friends, and he's an atheist. And so these two get together, and they have tea, and they like to go back and forth. And at some point in the conversation, they always get down to God. And the millionaire says to the scientist, he goes, I can't believe that you don't believe that there's no such thing as God, or there's no kind of higher consciousness, and he goes, well, through all of my instruments and all the things I do, I can't find God. I can't, so no, there can't be a God, And then the millionaire seeker says, but you exist. So you can't deny that. You can't deny that you actually exist. And he's like, well, I don't know. No, I guess not. So anyway, the millionaire goes, I really want to challenge this, scientist. So he goes out and spends a lot of money, I don't know, $1 million+, and he builds an exact replica of the solar system. And he sets up magnets and does all this cool stuff where there's an exact replica of the solar system in this warehouse that has stars, and it looks like you're outside at night in the universe, and the planets are orbiting each other with no strings, complete replica of the solar system. And he goes and has tea with his scientist friend, and he takes him over to the warehouse, and he puts a little blindfold on him and takes him in, and he takes the blindfold off, and the scientist just looks around inside this place, and he doesn't know where he is or what he's in, but he just goes, wow. He's like, this is amazing. He's like, who created this? And he goes, oh, it just happened. And he says, okay, so the second principle, first principle, there's only the source. Okay, nirvana's in samsara. Second principle, man, and pardon me, ladies, so I'm just going to say man, woman, okay, is an object, a very uniquely programmed object that has a DNA sequence. But man, woman, this human being, it's a vehicle. Think of it like an advanced car. They have these Tesla cars now that drive themselves. You put in and it'll stop if there's danger. It will. They have cars now that will literally just take you wherever the GPS goes and make sure you don't run into anything. probably safer in some ways than even a human that's looking at their phone and doing this, Okay, so man, you can think of it, is a bioform vehicle. Man, woman's a bioform vehicle. So we could really say man, woman is an object that has been uniquely programmed at the DNA level. Some of that DNA ancestral, some of that DNA maybe even spiritually programmed, okay? And that DNA mixed with the conditioning of this object creates a very unique set of programming. And really, then we could say man, woman is an object much like a supercomputer, but a computer nonetheless. And with a computer, when you put in certain input, an output comes out. Okay, when you put in a certain input, an output comes out based on the programming, right, of that machine. So if you start to think of man or woman as a machine, as an object, as a vehicle, instead of thinking that it's you, because it's not you, you're a soul riding around inside the object. God, source, consciousness, all that is, created an ego so that there's an experience. And the ego is a self-reflective mechanism that cannot see its own mechanistic nature. The ego is a self-reflective mechanism that cannot see itself because it's been programmed to not see itself. In the deepest programming of it not seeing itself, it can't see that murder is wrong. And we would call that a psychopath, right? And God also had to create people that have no ego. And so some people like Ramana Maharshi was born with no ego from the moment of birth. So some people are born with no ego, and then there's varying degrees in between. Mother Teresa, and then you have, psychopath, serial killer, right? So every one that's created in duality has its opposite created at the same time. And then there's varying degrees in between. So if you have a 16-7 or a 14-5, so let's say I start with a 16-7, it's much harder to see your own ego because that's a part of the programming. Numerology is a way to see the programming. Astrology is a way to see the programming. Astrology gave birth to human design. Human design gave birth to the gene keys. But all they are is deeper lenses of analyzing your genetic programming. Some of your genetic programming is physical in nature. Some of your genetic programming, we could say, is spiritual in nature because it can't be read by the instruments of the physical world. DNA, nonetheless, is the instruction book. We often refer to DNA as our subconscious, and if you have any kind of healing work done, the healing is affecting the subconscious, which we say is reprogramming or restructuring the DNA, which is what gets done in energy healing, Reiki, divine healing, etc. Okay, so ego believes it is the doer. It believes, I get this one friend who's a multimillionaire, and he believes that he created all his multimillionaire businesses. And I chuckle inside. I don't want to fight with him. I love him. He's funny. But I'm just like, no, God working through you as a mechanism created all that stuff. You didn't do it. There's no you that did it. Okay. Just like there's no Joseph teaching the class. So there's no ego about me thinking, I'm this one grand teacher teaching the class. My soul brings some unique things through, but really I just have output based on the input of you guys being here. Okay. So that's why I want you all to teach a class, because God, soul, universe will speak through you and use your mouth as a mouthpiece based on you being of divine service and the intention of the class. Those energies come together. And as those energies come together, the Vesca Pisces is created. Two energies coming together create a third. That energy is what teaches the class because because the class, yes. Okay, so let's do the third. Okay, so going back to what Buddha said, events happen, deeds are done, there is no individual doer thereof. So here's another story about input, output, and the difference between an enlightened sage and an ordinary man. Ordinary man is walking down the street, and he walks past this alley, and he hears some tussling, and he hears a girl cry out. He looks down the alley, and he sees there's a girl getting abused by a man. The input, the stimulus, is I'm witnessing abuse. In the man is programmed to have bravery. Not every man, some men would just keep walking, but this man was programmed with bravery and programmed with this is not right. So this man engages, that's his output. The output is his action. He engages to tackle the man off the woman. So far in the story, there is no ego. None. None of this is ego. This is just input, witness, output, action. Okay. Part of the output is I'm angry that this is happening. I must do something to protect this woman. That's all part of the inner process. And because of my anger, I'm going to use that. I'm going to tackle this man. Okay. This man, the man that he tackles hits his head and dies. Police come. They put the man that was the rescuer in jail for manslaughter. Man is now in jail for manslaughter. That was doing what he believed was the right thing to do. And he's sitting in jail going, oh man, I'm such an idiot. This woman had her own karma, her own dharma. She attracted this. Why did I go and try to rescue her? Why did I rescue her? Oh, so stupid of me. Idiot. Why? Now I'm going to be in here forever. Okay. Everything I just said in the crazy voice is the man's ego. The ego is the self-reflective consciousness that comments about what's wrong with what just happened. Whether if it was something somebody else did, it's commenting about what's wrong that someone else did. You know, Trudeau, Trump, you know, Biden, you know, pick these different people, you know, a lot of commentary, a lot of ego commentary, right? And if it was our own action that got us in some kind of trouble, the ego comments on how inadequate or stupid or whatever we were. Yeah. Okay. So the ego, you can think of as like the sports commentators commenting about what the activity that's happening. Okay. That's another way of you looking at the ego. When you look at a soul contract, you're looking at one way, one really unique and really awesome way of how the ego's been programmed. When you look at human design or gene keys or astrology, you're looking at the programming. Okay. So now let's say, just for the sake of, well, we won't say this. We'll say there is a man who's an enlightened sage. It's 24 hours later. He walks down and in the same city, and there's a different woman that's getting abused. Sage sees that and goes, I got to protect this woman. If I get hurt, so be it. This is wrong. I can't, you know, and there's not a lot of thought other than I just got to stop this. The sage, enlightened sage, runs down the alley, tackles the man. Man hits his head and dies, gets arrested for manslaughter. Now the sage is in jail with the ordinary man that's all pissed off still going, I can't believe I'm in here. Okay. And the sage and the ordinary man end up sharing stories. And the ordinary man says to the sage, says, so, you know, aren't you pissed? Aren't you upset? You know that you're here? And the sage goes, no, I'm not upset. How are you not upset? The sage goes, this is what God wanted. I don't have to understand it. This is what God wanted because this is what happened. The sage knows that regardless of how long he may be in prison, that there is a balance happening because God, source, consciousness, all that is, does not make mistakes. And so the enlightened sage accepts in every moment that there is only one source, that there is only one consciousness in control of the all that is happening at all times. And the sage, without a second, is in acceptance. Those that are growing spiritually are somewhere between the ordinary man and the sage. And there's different degrees of it. And you can start to play around this as an idea. Imagine that the sage is a 0. 0 means there is no ego in me getting upset because of what happened that I didn't want. 10 is the ordinary man or ordinary woman that's going, oh my God, I can't believe it. That son of a bitch Biden and that son of a bitch Trump and Trudeau. And there's varying stages in between. And there's no judgment because the commentary is also a part of the programming. We actually can't, this is a very difficult thing to accept. For me, it took a long time. We can't change our programming in real time. You can't actually change your programming in real time. You can only change your programming after what happened you realize is not something that you want to be a part of again. And so, for instance, let's say you close your heart to an old friend that betrayed you. And you go, I'm never talking to that person again. She's a son of a bitch. or she's a bitch, whatever you say, right? And you go, I'm never talking to him again. Okay. And then you go, you sit with that and you meditate and you go, I don't like how that feels to close my heart to people. I don't like that. I want to change that. I want to shift that. So maybe you have some Reiki done. Maybe you do some divine healing. Maybe you spend a little time sitting with what inside of my programming causes me to close my heart. And then through working through that, through working through your own inner process of desiring to change your programming, and if that is in alignment with God's will, then it will happen. And through that, now you have shifted the programming. So when there's another input of a friend, doesn't mean you're going to go back and be friends with that one friend that betrayed you. But the next, let's say your spouse or your mate or one of your new friends betrays you, instead of closing your heart, you talk about it. Why are you talking about it? Because your heart didn't just close all the way down like a vault, because you've been doing some work on your heart opening. You've been working on the machine to change its programming. This is how you can come into complete forgiveness of yourself. Whatever you've done or haven't done that's harmed you or others was a result of your programming. That programming you didn't have any control over really in the real moment of it happening. Forgiveness can be the simplest thing when you understand that there's this great cosmic joke. The cosmic joke is the movie set has been set up. The temptation, even the dark impulses you may have within you, is all designed by God. Not just to see what you're going to do, but to see, are you going to sit with your feelings after what happened and make a new choice? Or are you going to say, ooh, that was delicious, let me get more of that darkness, which some people choose to do. And their choice is to just do more dark things. And that also is their choice. But going back to the Ouroboros, eventually the predator becomes the victim. And then eventually, after you're done being the victim of the predator, then you become the rescuer who still believes in the victim and predator analogy and story. And then eventually to transcend this, you have to transcend, and this is again, to take steps towards enlightenment, you get to step away from, there is no victim, there is no predator, and there is no rescuer. Those are all roles that we play. And it's also a role we can choose not to play if we have the consciousness enough to choose that as a role. Okay. So I'll say it one last time. Events happen, all created by God. Deeds are done, input, output, programming, but there's no individual doer thereof. There is a soul, though. And your soul is the bridge between God and man, God and woman, God and the machine. And the soul is there which is the truth of who you are, is the soul, is the divine spiritual crystal soul that you are. That's the truth of who you are, which only knows love, because it's been created in love. But as it rides around inside this machine, it's going to experience blocks to love. And then if it chooses, which if you connect to your soul, it will, you can make the choices to remove those blocks to love. So the more of the soul, kind of like Tim's skyscraper analogy, more of you can move into the lower parts of you until the whole building of you is filled with the light of God that you are. So on that note, let's take a break and let's have a tea. Come back in 10.